My name is Nicole Naditz, and in this video, we're going to do a very quick introduction to a few different aspects or characteristics of successful distance learning programs. So this is by no means an in-depth professional learning and really is designed to give a brief overview of some of the factors that contribute highly to the success of our learners when they are in distance learning situations. So let's get started. One of the first things we need to do is actually set up a means for constant kind of multi-directional communication. We need to be able to communicate with our peers, but also with our students. Students need to be able to reach us. Families need to be able to reach us. And we need to be able to manage all of that communication in a way that is doable. We want to connect with students and families regularly so that they never feel like they are alone in this learning journey. And that can be a real concern when students are at home with nothing but a device in front of them. As we are designing the communications that we are going to send out to families, it's really important to be mindful that too much information can be really hard to digest. So how can we break up a complex topic into smaller chunks or segments? Or is there another way that we can make it easier for our students or our families or whoever is going to receive this message to understand it? Remember that even with the initial kind of introduction we all had to distance learning in spring of 2020, this is really still new for teachers. Designing learning experiences and also platforms where this learning is going to be housed and where the communication will take place is normally done over a period of months or years. So it's new for teachers and other educators, but it's also challenging for learners and families and for all of your colleagues. We will talk a little bit more about feedback later, but you want to use your communication tools to provide feedback to your learners that they can use. But you'll want to be selective. You'll want to choose when your response would be most valuable and when it's not needed for you to give a specific response to students. You'll also want to choose where or in what setting that response will be the most effective. And it's really important to remember that you don't actually have to respond to every piece of work that your students submit, because there are other ways to ensure that learners receive feedback. When you're connecting with students and families and trying to build that structure, it can be helpful to provide and then advertise and communicate your office hours. And you could connect with video when possible during those office hours using Zoom, for example. Now, normally I would put building community as part one, but if we don't have a means to communicate with our learners, we really have to get the communication pieces together first and make sure that our learners and our families and our peers know how and when they can reach us. Now that we have that system in place, before we dive into academic content, it's really important to build community among our professional colleagues and build community with our learners. So one of the things you can do in terms of the professional space is really connect with other teachers who teach the same grade level or content area as you and kind of share the workload, right? You don't have to create everything all by yourself. In addition to using your adopted instructional materials for support and resources, you can also choose to kind of pair up with another teacher of the same grade or subject and decide that this week I'll take care of designing and sharing out the asynchronous lesson on this topic. Maybe you could do the lesson for next week and both of our classes will receive both of our lessons. And when something works for you, for your colleagues, when you're sharing and building together, also for your learners, it's important to share that out loud, right? That's going to help build that community, recognizing the successes that the learners are having, recognizing the successes that peers are having collaboratively and individually as they navigate this process. And if something didn't work out, please reach out and share your misses and also some thoughts you might already have on how to improve, because that will also go a long way towards building that community. And we can be honest with our learners in doing that, as well as honest with our peers. Build relationships with and between your students while supporting their social emotional needs and development. And we'll talk a little bit more about a couple of quick strategies, but again, this is just kind of an introduction and overview. But you want to use the tools of your platform, including the communication tools, to be sure that your students have an opportunity to feel like they truly are connected to and have a relationship with you, and that they are part of a cohesive community and have a relationship with each other. Make sure that as part of that community and that learning space, that your students have opportunities to share their thinking, to pose new questions for the class to explore, and engage in conversations within your lessons. And remember, conversations can be oral if they're in a live synchronous meeting or even on video. Or audio recorded, but they can also occur in a discussion board type setting where they are posting on something like a question in Google Classroom and having a chance to interact with each other when they do so. Because of the nature of distance learning, where we are at home and with our devices all the time, it can be tempting for learners, for teachers, and others to actually kind of get lost in the learning and lose themselves and not feel like there's any end to the day. Everything starts to kind of flow together. It's also important to realize that sometimes learners need guidance in terms of how much time they should be spending on the work that you're providing. So setting a schedule is going to be really important for your learners and their success. Keep the schedule simple. It goes back to what we said in communication. We don't want to overwhelm our students and families. We want it to be clear and instantly understandable. And when you are going to provide some asynchronous learning, for example, make sure to break it into chunks that make sense for the age of your learners. For example, some research suggests that the chunk should be no more than 5 minutes for our longest learners. But you would just want to be cognizant of the fact that a video needs to be an appropriate length for the attention span and cognitive load capacity of your learners. So for example, 15 minutes to 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And remember, that's not just the video. The learning includes the practice. So be thoughtful about the fact that the learners don't just have to do your video, which they might need to rewatch, but they also need to do any practice activities you've established. Try to incorporate the home environment and where they are into the learning. Be mindful of screen time. Not everything that they do during distance learning actually has to be on a computer or tablet or phone. See if there are opportunities within your content area and grade level to have learners engage in new learning in a way that is more kinesthetic and physical. And make sure that you set up a schedule to support your health and well-being as well. When you're designing those new lessons, you really want to design for learning. That's different than planning to teach, because that tends to be an emphasis on the checklist of things the teacher will do. Whereas what we really want to do is design purposefully to ensure maximum learning. How do we design in ways that ensure the learners will have the most success? So something you can do is kind of use a checklist, whether it's your own lesson that you've designed or materials and lessons you've curated and borrowed from other sources. Does the lesson do the following things? Does it lay a foundation for the new concepts and skills by beginning with a review or providing some kind of activity to reactivate prior knowledge or get the learners ready cognitively for what they are about to do? Does the lesson have segments so that it is broken into digestible chunks that really will make sense for the learner and support their success? Does the lesson include built-in checks for understanding after each chunk so that learners can process the concepts and confirm their understanding? Does the lesson focus learners' attention by controlling how much is shown at a time or how much is shown at once by animating objects, which is what I'm doing here. As I talk, I bring in things one at a time so that you can see it. Or by using objects. For example, I have separation of the topics of this presentation with a slide that signals to you that we are transitioning to a new topic. Does it use bold or underline? Maybe color, although we do have to recognize that some students might have color blindness. But you could bold items or underline items to highlight important words and concepts. Does the lesson use visuals to support the oral and printed language in the lesson so that all of our learners, including those who are progressing in their English language development, can be successful? Does the lesson provide multiple, authentic, and meaningful opportunities for learners to demonstrate their skills and knowledge, build critical thinking, and demonstrate that thinking as well? And we'll want to focus on active learning as we design for learning, right? We don't just want them sitting in front of a computer passively taking in information. So we want to balance tech and non-tech activities and mix in some discussions and collaboration and video and audio clips. If you're using a tool like Google Classroom, you really want to leverage the features of the platform you're using in ways that invite the learners to interact with you, to interact with each other, and to interact meaningfully with the content. It's important to pose open-ended questions frequently and to invite your learners open-ended questions so that learners are engaged in critical thinking and problem solving, not just rote memorization and checking off multiple choice answers on a form. And then it's really important as well to provide learners with actionable feedback so that they can go back into their own work, revisit, review, improve, and make forward progress. Finally, you'll perhaps want to consider embracing multimedia assignments as you and your learners become comfortable with the many ways that this can be done with numerous technology tools so that learners have choice in how it is that they show their learning and demonstrate their skills. Finally, be flexible because there are going to be challenges and potholes and bumps along the way. And that flexibility includes differentiating, really planning for differentiation from the beginning so that you're already meeting your learners' needs and not having to react to a problem and differentiate after the fact if possible. You can also differentiate by being prepared to offer flexible due dates or windows of time during which something has to be accomplished. And of course, to differentiate the actual learning activities based on student need. Be flexible by being kind to yourself because you may feel overwhelmed or underprepared, but you really are doing all you can. So give yourself some grace and some patience. And remember that that's also true of your colleagues and your learners. So if you are looking for more resources and support, please visit San Juan Unified Schools District's Distance Learning Hub by going to our intranet portal for employees and click on the Distance Learning Resources tile. Thanks so much for watching.